As someone whose first name is Daniel, and also someone who likes both superhero media and spooky stuff, I'm pretty sure I'm legally obligated to talk about Danny Fenton at some point. A Nickelodeon show that first premiered in 2004 and ran for 3 seasons, the show follows Danny Fenton, a 14-year-old boy who accidentally gains otherworldly ghost powers after an experiment goes haywire, and can take on the alter ego of Danny Fenton to fight back against the various ghostly threats that are constantly haunting the town of Amity Park, while also having to juggle that superhero lifestyle with the struggles of being a 14-year-old kid in high school. The show has some pretty fun action scenes, some cool, well-designed characters thanks to the efforts of Steven Silver and Ben Bellistreri, and some really neat, if not on the nose, references and homages to various occult and horror-based media. And since I've wanted to talk about this show for a little while now, why not add another video to the What If series, and take 5 of its characters and give them 4 Pokemon apiece? So grab your Fenton thermos and get ready to go ghost as I tell you what I think it'd be like if Danny Fenton characters were Pokemon trainers. Oh, and just in case you've never watched Danny Fenton before, big time heckin' spoilers ahead. Let's start things off with Danny's primary antagonist, the devious Vlad Masters. Voiced by Martin Mull, Vlad Masters is a rich, powerful, and charming man who actually went to college with Danny's parents, Jack and Maddie Fenton, and helped them work on some of their earliest ghost-related experiments. However, it quickly becomes apparent that Vlad doesn't quite have the same fondness for the trio's old friendship as Jack does, mostly because he blames Jack for not only screwing up the experiment that resulted in a nasty case of ectoacne, but also for subsequently stealing Maddie, the love of Vlad's life. And thus, Vlad resolves to have Jack killed or otherwise humiliated and destroyed beyond all belief, one of his biggest means of doing so being trying to steal Maddie back from him, and even trying to turn his own son Danny against him. Oh, and there's also the small fact that Vlad's accident also turned him into a human-ghost hybrid by the name of Vlad Plasmius, but unlike Danny Fenton, who generally uses his powers for good, Vlad uses those powers selfishly, becoming one of the richest and most powerful men in the world in the process, even if all that fame and fortune can't really do much to quell all of his bitterness. Honestly, I've always been really interested in villains who are some kind of distorted reflection of the heroes they oppose, and Vlad Masters is a great example of that. Both he and Danny got ghost powers as a result of some faulty invention of Jack Fenton, but Vlad is what may very well have happened to Danny if he didn't have the support system of his friends and family around him and was left to fester in his anger and spite. But we're just making a silly little video giving Danny Fenton characters Pokemon teams, so there's no time to dive too deeply into all of that. To start off Vlad's Pokemon team, I definitely have to give him a Hisuian Zoroark, with its half normal, half ghost typing being perfect for a human ghost hybrid, but also because both it and its pre-evolution, Hisuian Zorora, are Pokemon driven by spite and vengeance, perfect for a man who blames his old college buddy for his isolation and misery. Next up, we'll go with an Alolan Persian, a Pokemon that not only has an incredibly high opinion of itself, but also isn't above fighting dirty, both of which describe Vlad to a T. Also, Alolan Persia being a cat is perfect for how, despite Danny teasing Vlad as being the kind of lonely single guy who adopts a cat because he doesn't have a love life, Vlad eventually does adopt a cat, which he names Maddie, as in the same name of the woman he's romantically pining after, and I can't be the only one who thinks that's really fucking weird, right? Anyway, after that, I'll give him a Malamar, a Pokemon who can hypnotize people and bend them to its will, really fitting for someone who frequently uses his ghost powers to force people to do what he wants, like when he overshadowed most of Amity Park's citizens so he could rig an election to ensure he became the mayor. But even without that, Vlad's not above using his natural charm and way with words to manipulate those around him to get exactly what he wants. And lastly, let's round out the team with a Passimian, a Pokemon based on a rugby player, which is probably the closest I could possibly get to a reference to Vlad's other obsession, you know, aside from Maddie's love and Jack's utter destruction, of course, owning his favorite football team, the Green Bay Packers.
I don't understand. You have billions of dollars. Instead of buying this stuff, why don't you just buy the team?
Because the Packers are owned by the city of Green Bay and they won't sell them to me.
So, has it just never occurred to Vlad to just, like, overshadow the owners of the Packers and just do the sale that way? You know, like he's done with, like, most other people whose companies he bought? Look, I'm just saying, man, maybe if you spent a little less time programming a hologram of Maddie that called you romantic pet names, you might have come across this really simple solution. Now let's go to one of Danny's closest friends, and one of the core members of Team Phantom, Sam Manson. Voiced by Gray Delisle Griffin, who's one of those voice actors who has definitely voiced some iconic part of your childhood, Sam is one of Danny's best friends, alongside Tucker Foley, and is a strong advocate for individuality and non-conformity. She may dress like a stereotypical goth, but her personality is far removed from that. She can be sarcastic, forceful, and a bit bossy at times, but also very caring and good-hearted, especially when it comes to those she cares about. And despite being an heiress to the fortune of an inventor, she never even tries to make herself more popular by flashing any of her cash, making it clear that she cherishes true, genuine friendships more than superficial ones based on status or social hierarchy. Passionate, rebellious, and strong-willed, there's no doubt that Sam is always willing to stand up for what she believes in and fight for what she cares about, even if doing so might occasionally get on her friends' nerves. Let's start off Sam's team with a pretty straightforward aesthetic pick, Gothitelle, primarily to represent Sam's goth aesthetic and fashion sense. Next up, we'll go with an Obstagoon, a Pokemon that obviously takes design cues from glam rock musicians, glam rock having a pretty big influence on gothic rock, and Sam has a pretty solid interest in music, with some episodes showing that she's a fan of bands like Nine Inch Nails. Plus, Obstagoon having the ability Defiant would line up pretty nicely with how Sam constantly rages against authority and conformity, whether it's at school or even at home with her own parents. Next up, and this might seem like an odd pick, but just stick with me here for a second, Spinda. See, every Spinda has an individual spot pattern, with the odds of any two Spinda ever having the same pattern being 1 in 4 billion, which I think is perfect for someone who always fights for individuality over conformity. And lastly, Trevenant, a Pokemon whose ghost typing could represent Sam's love of all things spooky and occult, but also whose grass typing could be a great reference for Sam being an ultra-recyclo-vegetarian, so, you know, she doesn't eat anything with a face. Plus, Trevenant's ability to control trees and plants at will could be a great callback to the episode Urban Jungle, where the villainous plant ghost Undergrowth takes over Amity Park and overruns it with trees and plants that brainwash the town's populace, including Sam herself, to whom he grants the ability to control plant life like some kind of goth poison ivy. And the weirdest part about that? That's not even the first time Sam tried to shove vegetation down everyone's throat. Of course, we can't talk about Team Phantom without one of the other core members, and one of Danny's other best friends, Tucker Foley. Voiced by Ricky Deshawn Collins, Tucker is Amity Park's resident technophile, always carrying around his trusty PDA and putting his technological expertise to good use for himself and his friends. He's also pretty flirtatious and thinks of himself as something of a ladies' man, though the ladies of Casper High typically tend to disagree. Tucker does have something of an inferiority complex when it comes to his friends, the superpowered Danny in particular, and tends to go on dangerous ego trips whenever he becomes empowered in some way. However, when push comes to shove, he'll do whatever it takes to keep his friends safe, and help Danny save the town that they all love. Let's start off Tucker's team with a Whimsicott, whose prankster ability is perfect for Tucker, given his tendency to be something of a lighthearted jokester, even if his jokes don't always land with the students of Casper High.
Dull man? As in man, is this dull?
Next up, there's no way someone who loves technology as much as Tucker does wouldn't have a Rotom, a Pokemon who inhabits technology and uses it as its own body. Plus, having at least one Ghost-type Pokemon wouldn't be too bad of a reference to that time that Tucker was given ghost powers of his own by the wish-granting Desiree, though they came with some pretty nasty side effects. After that, I'll give Tucker a Decidueye, and yeah, I know those facial markings around its eyes are meant to resemble a mask, but for some reason they always looked like glasses to me, and hey, Tucker himself wears glasses, so it kinda fits. Plus, more importantly, Decidueye attacks by shooting its sharpened feather quills like arrows, and Tucker himself, in the episode Beauty Marked, has shown that he has some archery skills. And to round things out, let's give him a Nidoking, a Pokemon Pokemon whose King suffix and poison typing could represent how, when Tucker gets into a position of power, he does tend to be more than a little toxic, which does make it kinda weird that he ends up being the mayor of Amity Park by the end of the series, but hey, at least this time it's of his own will and not because he's under some kind of ghostly spell. As long as he doesn't force everyone to wear red berets and build a giant sphinx in his image, I think that'd be a pretty big step up. Before we get to Danny, there's one more honorary member of Team Phantom we have to talk about, that being Danny's older sister, Jazz Fenton. Voiced by Colleen O'Shaughnessy, Jazz sees herself as more of an adult than an older sibling, despite being just 2 years older than Danny, and sees herself as the only responsible adult in the Fenton household, what with Jack and Maddie being so obsessed with their ghost hunting shenanigans. As such, Jazz has pretty much given herself the position of Danny's protector and role model, whether Danny wants or even needs one, and does tend to think that her intelligence and her understanding of the human condition makes her superior to others, even if she doesn't consciously realize it. But she does mean well, and as the show progresses, she learns to loosen up a bit on her white-knuckled grip on her intellect and on Danny's well-being, and subsequently becomes an indispensable ally to Team Phantom, really coming through in the clutch on more than one occasion. And I think a perfect way to reflect how she does that is by starting her team with a Klefki, a Pokemon whose litany of keys could reference the Fenton ghost hunting technology that Jazz makes pretty good use of to help Danny catch ghosts after she starts helping out Team Phantom, though her initial attempts to catch ghosts did leave a bit to be desired. Next up, we'll give her an Alakazam, a Pokemon whose supercomputer-like intellect is said to give it an IQ of at least 5,000, perfect for someone who's so loaded with book smarts that she apparently had gotten the highest scores in the history of the CAT. After that, I feel like Jazz would have a Kangaskhan, a very maternal and very protective Pokemon that would fit really well with Jazz's self-imposed overprotection of Danny, at times treating him like a helpless child rather than a little brother. And lastly, Teddy Ursa. Because, I mean, come on, of course I was gonna give her a Pokemon to represent Bearbert Einstein. No way she'd have a team without a rep for him. After all, I think we all know how well she responded the last time she could have been separated from Bearbert. And last, but definitely not least, it's the protagonist, the half-boy, half-ghost hero of Amity Park, Danny Fenton. Voiced by David Kaufman, Danny Fenton was just 14 when his parents built a very strange machine. A machine that went haywire, causing Danny to be infused with ghost DNA. An accident that would change his life forever. All of a sudden, he could fly through the air, turn invisible, phase through walls and solid objects, overshadow people to make them say and do whatever he wanted, and fire ecto-energy blasts from his hands, on top of being able to sense whenever a ghost was in the area. And that was just the start of the powers that Danny would gain, as he would develop even more as the series went on. Unlike the bitter and selfish Vlad Plasmius, who only used his ghost powers for his own gain, Danny decided to take his newfound powers and help to save his town and the world at large as the ghostly superhero Danny Phantom, always trying his best to keep everyone safe, all the while having to juggle that with the double life of being a teenager at Casper High. Danny is kind, compassionate, and pretty easygoing, but is obviously pretty worried about what his fellow students would think if they ever found out that he was half ghost, fearing that he'd go from geek to freak in a heartbeat. And that's the best case scenario, considering that his parents are ardent ghost hunters who would have no qualms about breaking down a ghost molecule by molecule. Of course, Danny's not completely above using his powers for petty reasons, more than once using them to get one over on Casper High's most prominent bully, Dash Baxter, or just to get out of trouble with Vice Principal Lancer. However, in the end, whether he's Fenton or Phantom, Danny's loyalty will always be to his good friends, his loving family, and to doing the right thing to stop the numerous ghostly entities that threaten Amity Park and to keep the world safe for another day. Let's start off Danny's Pokemon team with a Marshadow, obviously going with a half ghost to represent how Danny himself is half ghost, but also Marshadow being half fighting, not to mention how it specifically learned to master martial arts techniques by hiding in the shadows of a martial artist, and its ability being Technician, which powers up low base power attacks, could all mirror not only how Danny was able to combine hand-to-hand hand-to-hand combat with his actual ghost powers, but also how we saw his powers grow and develop over the course of the show. Next up, we'll stick with a half-ghost Pokemon for a second and give him a Hisuian Typhlosion, a Pokemon said to purify lost, forsaken souls and guide them to the afterlife, something that could be a pretty good reference to Danny's preferred method of returning antagonistic ghosts to the Ghost Zone, that being by sucking them into his trusty Fenton thermos before returning them to the Ghost Zone through his parents' personal portal. After that, we'll go with a Minior, a Pokemon that makes its home in space, representative of Danny's desire to be an astronaut when he grows up, something he was more or less able to do in the episode Flirting with Disaster, when he had to go up to space to fight a satellite-possessing Technus. And last but definitely not least, Hatterene. See, not only does Hatterene have the ability Anticipation, which senses if an opposing Pokemon has a super effective or one-hit KO move, something that would be a pretty great reference to Danny's Ghost Sense, but also, Hatterene's color scheme is pretty much the same as that of the transgender pride flag, and many Danny Phantom fans do tend to headcanon Danny Fenton as being trans, specifically transmasculine. And I'm gonna be super honest with you right now, one of those people is me. I'm many fans. I headcanon Danny as transmasc, and considering it's Pride Month when I'm uploading this, I think we should all let our favorite transmasc ghost boy have his day in the sun, don't you? But what about you? What Pokemon do you think the characters of Danny Phantom would have on their teams? Let me know in the comments below. Give this video a like if you liked it, subscribe for more spooky videos like this in the future, share this on your favorite social medias, and ring the bell so you always get notified when I upload. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video, friendos.